Technology has come a long way over the last 30 years, and as the technology changed, so did the business models. And with today's AI tools, it's easy to feel that you're paying more and more often for your software. But is that true, or are we better off than we were 30 years ago? To answer that, we need to take a journey back in time to 1996. Dolly the sheep was the first successful clone of a mammal. DVDs had just been released in Japan, promising previously unimaginable amounts of storage. And the Spice Girls exploded onto the charts with Wannabe, bringing girl power to the world. The business model of the day was physical boxed products. Now, manufacturers would take 1.5 to 3 years to make a new version, and consumers would go to a store and buy a physical product. They would then take their box home, install it, and they would have the full functionality of that application, which they would own forever. But due to the amount of people and the amount of time it took, the costs for this software were very high. But were they higher than today? In 1996, Adobe Premiere for the base edition cost around about $795. When adjusted for inflation, that's around $1,700. Today, that same software would cost you around $240 for a 1-year subscription at the base tier. But that's not the end of the story. You see, on average, users would upgrade their software every 1.5 to 2 years. So over, say, 3 years, 1990's version of you would have spent $3,370. Whereas today, over that same period, you would only have paid out around about $720. So there we go. Clearly, we're better off, right? Well, much has changed since 1996, and it makes it a little more complicated. In order to understand how we got to where we are today, we need to go back in time and understand where the business models have come from and how they evolved. As we've just established, the original business model was physical boxed products, where companies would get money from customers every 1.5 to 2 years. Next up came annual licenses. This was often used in conjunction with a physical boxed product, but had a passkey, and without the passkey, the software wouldn't work. The user would have to buy a new passkey every 12 months to maintain access to that software. And then came SaaS, software as a service, where there's no physical assets at all. You don't need to go to a store, you just get the service delivered to you via the internet. The user pays a monthly subscription fee based on tiers according to how much functionality and capability they require, and the service continues to be delivered to them for as long as they hold a valid subscription. And this has been the business model of choice for many years now. But a few years after the software as a service era began, a change was also taking place in the video game industry. In 2008, Apple opened the App Store, creating a new world of possibilities. While historically games had also been delivered via physical box products, the App Store ushered in an era where it made publishing games much easier, allowing companies to focus on making games and money. Free-to-play models emerged where users were allowed to download a game and play a certain amount of it for free. But these games were designed differently from anything that had come before. Rather than focusing on fun and value, these games were designed to keep players in the game as long as possible and extract as much money as possible. This then was the birth of microtransactions, where rather than sit and wait for some in-game timer to finish, players would use in-game currency that was bought with real-world cash in order to continue playing. But what's this got to do with AI? In a word, tokens. You see, the new wave of AI tools have taken this business model and applied it to their services. But being denied access to a game for entertainment is quite different from being denied access to a piece of software for your work. However, the same psychology applies. I'll use my real-life experience to illustrate this. When I first started using AI tools, I had no idea how many tokens I would need, so I just started using the free tier. And that was great until the tokens ran out. So after that, I looked at the different tiers and thought, okay, well, this is enough tokens, I think. So I went to the first paid tier, paying about $20 a month. And all was great. And then I ran out of tokens again. So, okay, I went to the next tier because what ends up happening is just like in a video game where you're so focused and so into what you're doing, you just want to keep going. So Very similar psychology applies here. And so I went from having no money that I was spending on this tool to $100 within a month, because again and again, I'd find myself hitting the top level of my tokens and then blasting through that. So now I had all the tokens I could possibly want, and I could code to my heart's content. Except I didn't. You see, this was when I was pausing developing the app to focus on starting the YouTube channel. And I hadn't looked at my account for quite a while. When I logged in, I found I had 500 credits and about 5 days left to actually use them. I was furiously prompting away, and all of a sudden got to a point where I realized I'm not going to be able to use these. Now, having been in the video games industry and understood things like this in-game currency, I assumed that tokens would be the same and that at least some amount of them would roll over into the next billing cycle. But I was wrong. And just like that, a new fear had been unlocked. Token anxiety. Whether it be worrying about how much each prompt I was entering was going to cost, or whether I had the correct tier of subscription for the next billing cycle, or whether I was going to lose credits. Tokens have become front and center as a concern when using AI-powered tools. So this is turning out to be a very complicated question to answer. For one thing, AI tools weren't around 30 years ago, so you can't do a direct comparison. And it all depends on which tools you select and how much you use them, for how long you use them. If we go back to the Adobe Premiere example, we seem to be better off. But if we use a different example from that same time period, let's say Microsoft Office, that was $500. And as I said earlier, upgrades came out roughly every 2 years. That $500 adjusted for inflation is around about $1,080 now, which if we take over 24 months, gives us around about $44 a month. Today, Office 365 Personal is around about $70 a month, which comes out to just under $1,700 for that same time period. Now, you are getting constant upgrades, bug fixes, new features, and storage with these costs. But does that really constitute a 30% increase when the manufacturers no longer have cost of goods? And on that note, after doing a little research, general inflation seems to be around 2 to 3%, whereas inflation on AI tools is around the 8 to 12% range. So, in the final analysis, are we better off? I think it really comes down to your perspective and your tool stack. From a capability point of view, we are definitely better off, given the amount of training and experience you'd have to gain in order to be able to do what you can do today with a simple prompt. From an accessibility point of view, we're worse off. We no longer own the software, and if we run out of tokens, then we lose access to the service. And tokens we paid for are lost forever if for some reason we're unable to use them in time. And finally, in terms of cost, as we've covered, it comes down to what tools you're using, what you're using them for, and how long you're using them. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments if you agree, and I'll see you in the next one.